Hi, and I'm very pleased to launch this first podcast episode with Thomas Voigt, founder and CV of TV Consulting, a company that consults various different organizations on customer success strategies and leadership. Thomas, great to have you here. Thanks for joining, and would love to hear a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Alex. I'm very excited to be here. As you said, I'm basically consult CEOs and revenue leaders, and in particular on everything customer success. So basically starting a customer success function or department, making sure you do the first steps right, the basics, but then also making sure you scale and you connect your customer success dots with the rest of go-to-market. My focus is on CSA, Series B companies. So if money's there and you, as a CEO, potentially have hired your VP of sales, and now want to really look at the customer success side, then I'm your man because I can help you doing this, bringing in the knowledge very frequently, and particular look at the new trends that we see at the moment in customer success, which I'm very excited about, which is
Definitely.
not only about AI.
Yeah. Okay, that's great to hear. And so you've worked for great companies, Nielsen, Sky, Discovery, etc., before moving into customer success in your first instance at GWI. What got you interested in customer success in the first place?
Well, I think the original motivation for me is basically connecting with humans. I mean, we all do this, but I'm quite curious to understand human connections in particular. So my background really is having studied psychology and marketing and communication, but then really using this and diving into the research side of things. So at Nielsen or at Discovery, I was heading up research departments, and I loved understanding, how people watch content or how they consume. And I think moving forward, I then discovered, how you can create businesses by understanding your customers properly and by listening to them and by having different perspectives on them and learning from them. So that was for me the next step to connect both and to, become a farmer, and go into the customer success side. And then as we moved along, I found it really exciting to not only where the farmers at, but at efficiency and see how we could do this. And now I'm basically consulting companies because I get bored quite quickly, to be honest, and I really like to jump into different cases and really spread out my knowledge that I have and that I've gained over the last couple of decades.
Great. And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to have you on this episode, because of the different experiences that you're going to bring from the companies that you've worked with. Now, you've just talked a little bit about the potential and value of customer success. In a lot of organizations, that's actually quite difficult to justify to the leadership, or we see, lower investment than potentially might be optimal. How do you help people understand the true value of customer success when you come into these organizations?
Yeah, that's a good question. First of all, there's no common understanding of customer success. I think when we think about it, you might just think about customer service, or you might think about customer success as a cost center. But I think that all has changed. So my first approach is really an educational approach and to showcase your CS department can be a revenue driver. So of course, how can we do this? Most importantly, customer retention, because we all know at some point that a new customer can be as much as 8 times more expensive to acquire than really making sure that your existing customer renews and stays with you. That's quite important, right? So that's a no-brainer. So recurring revenue obviously is what you're aiming for, because if you do have recurring revenue, you can then take this and develop this even further and spread this. And this is much more cost efficient. And as I said, 8 times or even 9 times, 10 times are more efficient than this. But further than this, you not just want to look at the funnel as such and look at the one product that you've got. You really want to think about expansion, upscale, cross-sale, and you want to think about new products, new services. You want to think about partnerships and so on. And maybe you don't know now at the moment, what are the next steps are, but you want to focus on your customers to really use them as a revenue driver. And finally, I think customers are the source of truth. They are the single source of the truth that give you information about how to set up not only your CS function, but also the wider go-to-market function, like marketing, like revenue, like sales, like product, and like engineering, and so on and so on. Because this is the source of your validation of your products, how they land, of how you really kind of serving this idea of a product market fit. Are you getting to the right pain points or not? So, and this is, I think, what you need to do first
And
before
it's
you.
incredible that so many organizations, especially in the B2B space, they have, relatively lower understanding of a kind of unified view of their customer. And so organizations are sometimes operating in a lot of cases, in these silos, right? That's what we've seen a lot from our conversations over the last 24 months. And, obviously there's a lot of things out there which are changing very, very rapidly. We'll talk about that later. One thing I wanted to touch on when I spoke to you last time, you have a fairly, what I might call kind of, I think, modern view of customer success, a very clear one, right? We need to move away from the uncertainty. You think customer success should carry revenue, and we need to move away from, especially in the B2B space, we need to move away from this kind of account management versus customer success uncertainty. Can you tell us, our listeners a little bit more about your views there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think originally, as I said, we had these differences between the ones who like to make sure that the customers are happy, are being well looked after, the customer service side of things, and then we got the ones who basically got the contract in. And I've seen a lot of companies who still have these kind of different, almost different sub functions in revenue. But the most important thing is to have an alignment, and this alignment can be by choosing, for example, aligned KPIs. So you need to make sure you both work towards one commercial goal. That could be NRR, that could be the net dollar retention, as I said, or it could be any other kind of commercial metric that really aligns you. Maybe it's just a target number that you've got. That's important, most important thing.
Yeah.
Formerly, customer success or customer service folks were really measured by NPS. But as we all know, we moved on. NPS is great to understand the wider appreciation of your services, but it's not really good to define, define specific follow-ups for your team. So you need to make sure you've got really metrics in place that drive your revenue going forward. So for me, customer success today is a view where you need to commercialize all your team members. And when you come into a company, customer success can look different, right? Because you're in a different stage of the company. You could have different products and so on. You need to really understand what is your common denominator. How can you really work towards a common goal? And as I said, having this as a goal defined, having this written down in OKRs, that's the first step.
Yeah, I think from my experience, right, what I've noticed, especially in a pure software play where there's very little kind of what I call real world operational work, then I'm strongly biased towards having one function, customer success, right, to help that adoption and to also own net revenue retention. When you get into more complex service delivery methodologies, I think potentially there's a justification for different types of roles, right? Even a kind of post-sales solutions engineer, sometimes you can see a more technical products. But in general, I think you're right. You really need to assess the stage and the type of business that you're working with. And one very important factor, right, especially for CEOs in Series A and Series B, is you need to bring in someone who is experienced, who can understand the nuances. And so I'm wondering, if you're Series A, Series B, it's been tough 24 months, right? And you're beginning to think about rolling out customer success. What are the qualities of that leader? What type of leader are you bringing? How do you assess that? Maybe you could share that for us.
Yeah, totally. I think the leader in CS is going to change. And there are a couple of things that I really see. The first of all is, why should you invest in CS? you need to invest in CS because you want stability in your forecasting at the end of the day. So the problem that we see at the moment is, yes, you need to make more with less, basically, and we know there are difficulties sometimes to hit your goals, but what helps is if your forecasting is more accurate. And you will reach this by basically having leaders in place who are, first of all, I think, a great steward of capital. So you have been trusted as a CS leader with taking some money and spend this wisely. So you want to get your head around, not only just to go in and spend, these days are over, but you need to spend very, very effectively. You need to understand the numbers and you need to understand what it means.
Yeah.
So you need to know what an NRR is, for example, what the GRR is. You need to know this. And you need to also have an alignment of these numbers and how they've been pulled, with your CFO, your FF departments, and of course, with your board. Because at the end of the day, as a steward of capital, you are going to tell the story of your success. And you ideally use all these kind of aligned numbers, but you create a story of how you efficiently have scaled up or will you scale up your company. It's the first one. The second one is you need to be a kind of system architect. And what I mean with system architect is you need to look at your funnel that you've got, but you can't just focus on the CS part, like the post side, sales side of the
Okay.
funnel. You
Yeah.
need to look at basically on the entire funnel. Your best friend is the VP of sales or your chief chief revenue officer, because what you can gather here is a valuable information from the onboarding, from the buildup of your customer base, of the buildup of the trust that you can feed back to your sales teams and to your reps. So basically, you are a source of learning, so a lot of learning. So you can go back and basically, reevaluate your ICP. You can talk to the sales reps and say, well, listen, this is what we've seen when folks really are onboarding. This is what we need to do. If you do have discovery calls, focus on this because that is the function that really resonates quite well. And this is the main pain point and so on and so on. So you see, a leader needs to kind of come in and foster this culture, right? You can't just sit there and decide it. Also, you need to be a peer player. As a leader, a peer player basically is a team leader, but your first team are your peers in your go-to-market. So you need to talk obviously to your CFO or to your VP of sales. But do not forget your marketing folks, your marketing leaders, your product leaders in this case, because you really need to make sure you connect this. And finally, speaking up and educating. If I really take it further, I would say there's a great chance for you to actually flip this funnel. If you think about the bow tie, then flip this funnel and start with the end bit of taking all this knowledge of your customer and distribute this back, and not only to your revenue folks, to your go-to-market folks, but to everyone. So when you are going to speak up in your all hands, in your town halls or whatever, make sure you bring customers, showcase them the entire story, showcase them the bad bits, the good bits, become a storyteller, but also encourage your team to do the same. You sit on so much information. Do not silo, speak up, and really distribute it all. And I think if you do these basics first, with this leader mindset, you're going to excel much quicker.
Yeah, I think, for anyone listening, right, I think a couple of the key points you've made there. Once you get to, senior director, VP, you really have to understand the revenue metrics, the OKRs, the financials of your organization to be really successful. That's one of the big learning curves from people who go from managing just a single team to taking maybe a regional or a global remit. Completely agree with you there. And of course, putting the customer front and center of the organization, critical. Easier said than done in some cases, right? I've definitely been there myself. When you're drinking from the fire hose, sometimes it's hard to get those great customer stories out there, but it is so critical for the other functions to be able to really see what's happening on the front line.
Yes.
So,
go ahead.
And so now we brought the leader in. you have a few simple steps in terms of how you roll out a strategy in an organization like, roughly Series A, Series B. I think it'd be very interesting to hear just a short little summary of kind of how you recommend people approach that.
Yes, absolutely. There are two things. Well, to start with, the first one is the customer segmentation. So depending on where you are, so let's assume you've got 10 clients or 15 clients or whatever, you do have some information about them, about the region, about their habits, what they like, industries, and so on. So start with this, because if you do not understand your customer segments, you will not be able to prioritize in the aftermath. So you need to focus on your ICP at the end of the day, right? But before you do this, you need to understand, how does your customer base look like? So segmentation is great. And depending which stage you are, and which kind of growth stage you are, and which industry you work in, it depends on how deep you want to go. So there are different models, but I think that's the first one. The second one is, well, client journey mapping. What is that? So you basically look at post-sales process. You start
Yeah.
with, the time basically when there was an agreement, you've got a closed one,
Sure.
opportunity, and then you need to kind of look at from now on, what is the mapping, what are the touch points of your client with your company going forward, and you go through onboarding.
And one question there, Thomas. So, when you're going through that client journey mapping, how important and how tightly are you working with the product team and the engineering team? Because obviously it's very tempting to think that you can buy some solutions that a lot exist now to help structure that process. A lot of it can be quite handheld. But at the end of the day, we're trying to build a very slick software onboarding experience. What are the things you've seen working with a collaboration between post-sale and product?
Yeah, I think you need to have very clear swimming lanes in place. So I think when you do set up an onboarding process, it's quite important to really make sure, if you've got a system in place where you do look at different segments and onboard them appropriately.
Okay.
But of course, you need to also make sure you feed back information to product, but also to marketing. Onboarding for me is a great way to explore, the time to value phase, where you can learn a lot from the very first instance, where you can be acquainted to, new pain points that they haven't known before. So that's great, but it doesn't stop there. If you go further through the mapping, you will discover further pain points or further important information. All of that needs to be gathered and kind of feedback to other departments. And we will talk about AI and how you can use tools to do this. And that's quite important, because it's hideous. It's great to kind of have this idea of looking at a map. Fantastic. But what you need here, in particular in terms of efficient work, is, well, you need tools to gather all that, put AI on it, and make sure you condense that and distribute this to the right next level, and make sure you have your learnings from this and become even more efficient. That actually is the end goal, right? So as I said, segmentation is number one. Number two is this mapping, and number three is AI and automation. So that's absolutely key, because 2023, I think, was a time, or 24, the early stages where AI companies, I think, were a little bit in beta, and I think now we do really see products that increases your efficiency massively. And if you do think about these segmentations and client journey mappings, these are the basics for me. They need to be done. But these days, you can do it quicker. And the good thing is, you get far more out of this. And if you do align with everyone and go to market, that's amazing. That's a great starting point.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Right, at 42AI, we're looking at our segmentation ICP at this stage all the time. Your ICP is more of a hypothesis. There are so many moving parts and variables. And I think even still at Series A, potentially Series B, obviously things are going to be a lot more formalized. You definitely have a good understanding of what your initial ICP is. But going beyond that, right, there's a lot of experimentation. There's a lot of patience. You can go down some dead ends, right? Some things can look very lucrative. And then you get sometimes some rather unfortunate regulatory obstacles which prevent you from going after a particular vertical, particular segment. And those take time, right? I suppose that's where the famous kind of crossing the chasm really comes from that second, third ICP as you begin to kind of potentially, if you are trying to move up market. And you did also mention a little bit about AI. I completely agree with you. The launches that we've seen from both privately held startups and now privately held incumbents, as well as probably a little bit lagging are public companies in their launch, bar a few of the kind of well-known brands that we're all familiar with. So, how are you seeing it infiltrate into organizations that you're working with? What are the kind of what are the tools that you're excited about, and are there any real world applications that you've seen being successful? I'd love to hear what your view is right now on the kind of on a very dynamic space.
Yeah, we touched upon this. I think now, basically, in Q4, we see the brickwork there for AI tools really come to fruition going forward. So I've seen companies working with isolated AI solutions. I think there's still a little bit of hesitation, to be honest, and a bit of confusion, because AI for all of us, independently of running a business, right, is basically with us now, and we need to move from being fearful and not knowing really what it is, and and it might take roles away and jobs away and so on, and what it will do with private policies and so on and so on, to a stage where we really can see, okay, that is great because it will help us to outsource tasks that we don't want. It makes us more efficient, and it actually there's something in for all of us individually. So that's quite important. So, and what I see is isolation, kind of isolated use cases of AI. Of course, everyone knows ChatGPT or Gemini and all these kind of tools, and we all use that.
Yeah.
I think there are some tools that really now come into fruition and that we all use more and more. So, like AI note takers, there are many out there that we all know. But if you connect the note taker, for example, with ChatGPT and bring this all together, and you could ask, your AI tools or your ChatGPT, not only what is the summary, but how can I use this going forward to help my client? What are the next opportunities here, to grow? So this is fantastic because it's not only a note taking and a summary that you can send out to your client much easier. We know this, but you get actually much more information out of this because you look towards the future and opportunities going forward. This is what you want, right? Because you want to expand. Further than this, we know there are some former bots that are now AI supported from these big players, and they are getting great again because they are more personalized. They can change, the tone of how they speak with customers depending on what you do and so on. And that's just great. But what I'm excited about is tools like Loom, for example, or HeyGen, where you can just record yourself or create avatars and then use the opportunity to speak to your customer segments in a different way with a different tone, tonality, and so on. So that helps you to, first of all, become or remain in this human space, have your face being presented. And what I've seen at the moment, for example, by just looking at HeyGen, or I've checked it out for myself, I'm stunned by the quality that we see now. So fast forward maybe, I don't know, half a year, 6 months, maybe 10 months, this will change dramatically and this will be fantastic. So if you open up for this and take this as an opportunity to build trust and to go to your different customer segments and use this more in an efficient way for yourself, but also for your customer, that's a big win-win going forward. And I think these are the new parts that are coming now together, where I think we all need to be open. But for us in CS, it's a great way of just being the ambassador of this journey and just taking the fear away and just showcasing what it can do.
Yeah, and I don't know what you think, but from what we see right now, I'd say we're kind of moving out of purely AI being used as an add-on that someone is manually engaging with to execute tasks, And the next phase, which is coming, out of both small startups and mainly, and also the large incumbent privately held organizations, is essentially integrated AI. So that's where it's being embedded, either through APIs or directly into the product. So you're beginning to see these workflows where there's no longer that manual element to it. It's a completely seamless experience. And but it's still at this stage, in my view, mainly human in the loop, right? There's still that inspection element. There's still the requirement to have someone guide, prompt, and potentially, re-request a task to be executed. And so, we've seen so many advancements in LLMs, but also now in voice and video. So you do begin to wonder at what point it's going to, that we'll realize a moment where you can completely automate these tasks. And I think for organizations to be ready for that, from my perspective, right, you need to have, a well-integrated tech stack. I think that's really important, right? I'm not sure that very, very, I don't think your data has to be absolutely pristine. I think that there are ways around that, and I think that you can start. We spoke a couple of days ago about starting smaller with some of your applications of AI. Good integration, good, reasonably good data are going to help you here. But I think there's going to be a lot more tools that are going to come out to help companies really take advantage of this wave. And the big thing we've seen now is customer success managers, let's say, for example, spending a lot of time between these different applications, moving data from one place to another, doing these manual tasks. I think that's the initial opportunity, right? But then, I don't know what you think, maybe 6, 12, 18 months time, I think the fully automated use cases are going to begin to come through. And just to kind of conclude my point there, Best in Adventures, I saw a presentation, right? It's no longer going to be ops supporting humans, but it's actually going to be humans supporting the ops. That's kind of a little bit more the direction that we're moving towards.
It is. I think we need to understand that AI is going to help us big time. This is what I said. I think the human aspect that we still bring at this emotional fear that we have, and needs to be dissolved. And I hope it will be dissolved, because we all will learn very quickly, how AI is going to help us. And you mentioned different use cases like for CSM. If I look at, customer success managers, what they don't like to do, it's very simple. Take a piece of paper, write it down. What are the things that really are creating pain points?
Okay,
and
now I'm
these are
interested.
the areas that you can really sort out,
Yeah. Okay. So do you have example? What do we think customer success managers don't like doing, right? I'd probably say filling in manual spreadsheets about all the things that are going wrong with their customers, for one. But
yeah, but there are far more. So, for example, a lot of CSM do prep time. They do prep time for their clients. They do prep time for their managers going forward. And also, what I discovered after is, filling in information about your, the last touch points that you had with your customers in, your CRM. People hate this. Not everyone is good at this. And this is, for example, a great area of just, making sure you can use AI, because you can use AI to capture all these different touch points that you have. And you mentioned this data integration is quite important. It needs to come together and being really sourced in your CRM, whatever you use, but it needs to be there. It needs to be a central source of truth, because that's then been used to forecast further things, to look in the future, to look at opportunities going forward, to create cheat sheets for your managers. So ideally, you want to have everything in there. And you also want to have this connected to other go-to-market tools, basically. So think about the sales tools that you can use. Think about other tools that you use, intelligence tools, for example, about the markets. You want to have ideally one-stop shop to go in as a CSM, as a leader, and actually get everything you want to know for your specific client, your segment, and so on. So ideally, within a couple of minutes, you are prepped. You know what to do. So we free up a lot of time for what? for basically having headspace to focus on what really matters, which is your connection with your human on the other side, your client, your peers or whatever. So this is important. So you see AI is taking all these pain points away from you to enable you to actually grow. And what I said before is you need to become, somebody who's going to really focus on your client, because if you don't do this, if you don't listen, you're not going to perceive, and you're going to end up in a silent situation. And this is what we've seen throughout 2023, 24, going forward. And this is the great benefit of AI going forward. So if you come to this mindset, then you see like, oh, wow, if that's really something that we can use, fantastic. But I agree with you. You can't just say, here's the system going forward. You need to start where the company is, the data. If you just have 10 clients and you start to do your customer success with an Excel spreadsheet, you just don't invest in a holistic, new, big, AI tool or system. You need to kind of experiment. And this is what I see for 2025. It's going to be a lot of experimentation time. So it's not like that companies will overinvest and overcommit in one or two tools. I think it's going to be checking, having trials, and basically understanding what's good for their clients, but also what's good for their members. And it needs to be just not only for the tech company or for the tech department, who's basically for RevOps, who's deciding on the tech stack. It needs to be good for everyone, and that's quite important. AE, as well as sales folks, as well as your revenue leader, and ideally the board. So if you connect all this and you make your groundwork here and to understand how help could look like, supported by AI, then it's a great starting point. And I believe while you move then along, maybe 9 months or so, you might be happier, or might be open for more investment going forward.
So that's a nice segue on to my next question, and probably one of my last. You've mentioned this future state, right? And a little bit about the trends for 2025 onwards. I'm wondering, with all this investment, what do you think the new efficiency metrics and the new performance expectations, once you've implemented this technology, what do you see the trends maybe in rep to account ratios, in your cost efficiencies versus the expansion revenue that you're producing? Kind of like, how quickly are leadership going to start really begin to want to see gains from this, and where do you think those numbers might go?
That's a good question. I think there's no single answer to this. I think for 2025, what's going to remain is that you need to grow efficiently, and everything what you need to do. This is going to stay. I think, as I said before, start with a metric that you want to measure, that everyone has bought into. That is not going to change. That's quite important. There's an opportunity for me to see that CS will take the center stage of go-to-market. And this is, if CS is clever, then, or CS leaders are clever, they will see the opportunity here. And as I said, if you look at the end of the funnel, if you turn this around and if you look back, you have so much power to influence your peers, you go to market with data. In particular, if you source things out with AI or help with AI solutions, you can now really focus on what's really important, on achieving an accurate forecast and fostering a really customer-centric culture. That's important. So that hasn't really been, this hasn't been the role or the skill set of a CS leader before, but this is an opportunity going forward, right? So there are new leaders out there. And if you look at LinkedIn as well, I see there's a community now coming up of folks who like to share, like to experiment, but also are laser focused on how you can change the perception of CS away from this cost center thinking to basically someone who is driving not only revenue, but driving the culture of your company. And that's quite important these days as well.
I think from what I've seen, right, customer success is without question always the hardest working team on the GTM team, right? And sometimes that you can get really bogged down in the immediate requirements of your customers, in what's burning. And in some cases, I look at some of the ratios, some companies today, right, heavily weighted towards account executive versus roles like customer success. And so there has also been a little bit of underinvestment, I think, in some cases. So I think what you're saying is really wise. And one of the things I think is really important now is kind of which customer success leader are you working for? Because there is going to be a change into how teams get set up as a result. So I think you need to be very, very clearly, right? I think you need to be in the right team. Great to go to a company which is leading on the change, and dog fooding their own product, so to speak. But there's also going to be a lot of organizations out there who are being really innovative. And I think for a customer success manager, that's where I'd want to be for 2025 onwards, because this is a seismic shift in how people do things. And I think it can really accelerate customer success management.
Yeah. One thing to add is, the human aspect of why we're all doing this, right? And it's great to talk about AI and how we can see that tech is helping us. But at the end of the day, it's about finding value and finding meaningfulness in your work. And if you get rid of noise, get rid of stuff that was really a burden for you to connect with your customers, you are opening up to really connect your values with the company values and what you want to achieve for your customers. So it's almost like freeing up a little bit of space in your brain and your emotions that enables you. And that, for me, is the key, right? Because if you look back into what really matters in a human connection, is being able to really focus on what matters, what's good for the other person. And this is where we need to go back to. And that's the main important thing. It sounds very simple. But again, talk again about AI. But if you look at this way, then we can almost like see there's a future for reconnecting with ourselves and our connections, to make sure we drive businesses going forward.
100%.
Yeah.
I think that's a great opportunity, and I think it's a very good point to end on. Thomas, people listening, how do they get in touch? How do they consume some of your thought leadership? Please, would love to know.
Yes, absolutely. I am on LinkedIn, as you all know, and I'm assuming we will share the link.
Sure.
I'm active on X as well. But most importantly, I do write every week. I do have a newsletter at the moment on LinkedIn where I share my thoughts about everything CS. It starts with how leaders need to be these days, what my trends, predictions are for next year, what to think about AI, where to start, and so on. So as I said, I'm focusing on CEOs at the moment in particular, so I'm quite specific. But if you do have any other questions or want to chat with me, please do this, and you will find all this information on how to reach out to me on LinkedIn on my profile.
Great, Thomas. Thank you very much for your time today. Been really brilliant conversation. See you soon.
Thank you very much, Alex.